It is now my honor and my privilege to invite Dr. Iwan Syahril, the Director General of Teacher Educational Personnel, Ministry of Education and Culture, Republic of Indonesia, to give us his presentation this morning. Pak Iwan, the floor is yours.
Hi, Pak Shoaib. Thank you so much. Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a privilege for me to be here in this very important session and important forum. I'm here today to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been happening with the Ministry of Education, and also reflections about how we think about going forward. So the title of my presentation is From Classroom to Hybrid, Reimagining Teaching and Learning. I would say that's more focus is more about reimagining teaching and learning, especially during the pandemic, what has happened. So adding more into what the minister has shared with us, but maybe with some more information. So I'll structure my presentation into three parts. The first one, just to give some reminder again for those who haven't maybe got the chance to think about or know about Merdeka Belajar and the transformation of teachers and school leaders. And then we look at what has happened during the pandemic and the multi-modalities in teaching and learning. And then the question about, this is maybe one of the most important questions, how can education technology realize its promise, especially in terms of assisting student learning? The minister has mentioned so many great insights about the big picture, the big vision of it. And we know we need to go forward with technology to enhance all the possibilities of access and quality and equity for quality education for all learners. Yeah, go to the next slide. So the first of all, this is the framework and how we think about the Merdeka Belajar or emancipated learning. The main goal of the emancipated learning is to provide a high quality education for all Indonesians. And there are three components here. The first one is the enrollment. So we have to put kids to school. And then when they are in school, the quality of the process and outcome should be there. So that's the second pillar. And the third pillar, how all kids, no matter where they are in Indonesia, get access to this kind of quality process and quality outcomes. So equitable distribution, regardless of the geography and also socioeconomic status. But actually the secret ingredient is what is on the top left side of the slide here, which is the agency, the influence and support from all stakeholders. And this is the point that the minister mentioned earlier about the partnership. Partnership is the way to go. Partnership is how we operate at the moment, or in Indonesia, this is basically rooted in the philosophy of gotong royong. So we believe that to do the leapfrogging in education, we need to get all stakeholders to work together towards the common goal. And the common goal is about the students. This is the most important component too that needs to be reminded time and time again. It's not about the adults, but it's about how we provide the best service to the students. They are the future of our nation, and they are the center of all the programs. So it's not just about the student-centered learning, but we need to create student-centered programs and the student-centered policies. So all should be aligned towards how to help the students. But all stakeholders need to be work together. So it's not just about the schools and the teachers and the family, but also the employer, the industry, and also the society in general. Organizations need to work together. So the minister has mentioned about some of our programs that highlighted how we transform the partnership, or Pak Ilham mentioned the emancipated partnering, yeah, the term, how we go about our business in ministry. So next slide, please. So with that in mind, the transformation framework, especially in my Directorate General, is we have this message house, or the key component of our programs in a house format. The top one is about the student, and we have the profile for our graduate outcome in our education system is called Pelajar Pancasila. So it's about, they have to be strong, the global competencies. So critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, but still rooted in the values of Pancasila. So which is our the values of our nation. So this is like the ultimate outcomes that we want for our human resources that coming out of our education system. And then we have the lighthouse schools. And this is the philosophy, again, the gotong royong philosophy. We want schools that are already operating very well and have good quality, also have like this call for service. So it's not just about their school, but also how to help the neighboring schools, how to also share the expertise with the schools or educators around them and work together with all the components, the private sector, the organizations in the society, the universities, work together and then create this learning hub within their communities, so then they can help the educators or schools that are still a bit left behind. So this is the spirit and the philosophy that we want. So we want to this is what we call Sekolah Penggerak. We want to push this program. We are starting, this is our piloting phase at the moment, 2,500 schools, but then it's going to get more and more in the future. And how the Director General of Teachers and Education Personnel support this. First is our program in the very left pillar is transforming the educational leadership. We feel like this is very, very important. And this is what has been maybe a bit neglected in the past. So not really focusing on leadership. When we believe that when the school leaders not only like can lead well, but also can be the mentor and coach about what good teaching looks like. And they are like the instructional leaders. They can help teachers to teach at the right level, differentiate, personalize, and use resources, make decisions that will empower the student and their learning. So that is number one. We need to invest in that. So we have the program called Guru Penggerak. And the Guru Penggerak is not just about the teachers, but these are like the future leaders of our education system. And this is what the minister also mentioned earlier. And the second one is transforming the pre-service education. This is like our teacher candidates. We believe that, and we've seen like the education systems across the world, the top ones, they are very, very invested in the pre-service, and they are very strict in the quality and who gets into the system. So then this is one of our priorities at the moment, how to transform the pre-service education in Indonesia. And the third one is about how to create these learning hubs for teachers, Center of Excellence for Teacher Learning in every province. At the moment, the Center for Excellence for Teacher Learning are located mainly in Java. So then this is something that we feel we need to expand. We need to create these hubs because each region has like their different challenges. Just like when we believe about differentiated learning for students, we also actually should approach the differentiation and personalization for teacher learning, because each school, each region, they have like their own context and challenges. So their learning should also be made relevant towards the challenges that they're facing. And the fourth one is to empower education communities. This is the gotong royong spirit. So the way that we implement our program should emphasize on the importance of collaboration with many stakeholders in the ecosystem. And the fifth one is about governance. And this is also very, very challenging because the management of teachers and education personnel in Indonesia is shared with 514 local governments. I repeat, 514 local governments who have like their own situation and authorities. So then we need to create like also a partnership with the local government, so to make sure that the supply and demand of the teachers and education personnel are sound. At the moment, we are still not working very optimal on this, and it affects quality also in the long run. So if we don't get this right, like the recruitment of teachers into the system with the proper mechanism and with good quality control, the teachers who are not really meeting the expectation, the minimum expectation, can always be into the system, and this is not also obviously good for our kids' learning. So next slide. So what has happened during the COVID pandemic? I'm going to share with you a little bit in our insights and how this helped us to reimagine about teaching and learning in the future. So next slide. So we know that there are a lot of issues in the pandemic, as we know. But also, this disruption actually is an opportunity for us to reimagine, revitalize education, the way that we have especially the education technology sector has been sharing with us since long decades, basically. But now it's actually forced us to do this. And next slide. What we see is the use of technology has brought the impact with the anxiety level. So we believe that now is the engagement is much more, teachers are more familiar than before, and they're much less anxious about the use of technology in education. And it also creates opportunities for differentiation, different ways of learning than before. Next. What we see is basically is not about, yeah, we're still like learning about how to use technology effectively and relevant, because not like the minister said, actually we learn about the limits of the technology during the pandemic. But the most important part, I would argue, is the mindset change. The mindset challenge during the COVID pandemic is enormous. First, like all educators and also the stakeholders, especially with parents, we need to start to be okay with the uncomfortable, or be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And this is the mindset to accelerate the culture of innovation, to embrace uncertainty. So this is actually a very good investment that we can use going forward. And the second one is, surprisingly, is like to be a learner. And this is, maybe it should be, you know, it should go without saying that, yeah, teachers need to be learners, but in the past, mainly like they are in the framework of just following the instruction, comply with the regulations. With COVID, suddenly it is disruptive because it's not working. So they need to find new ideas, new strategies to deal with multiple challenges in their situation. And this is also like the mindset of a learner is something that is very, very promising, because the way they learn is not about complying with the regulation, but to solve problems. They put the students first. They try to teach at the right level because their students are have different conditions with their family. So they have to meet where the condition is relevant to the kids. And the embrace of technology is the last one. It's something that I mentioned earlier. And this also gives us more resources about what to do, how to differentiate strategies with student learning. Next. In our national survey last year, I'm taking like two surveys, one or in April, so just when the pandemic started, and one September, a little bit after the pandemic. So what we can see from this data about how teachers taught during those time was, at the first time, yeah, all graphic is it goes up. So at the beginning, we can say from this, teachers were confused about what to do, and then they figure out about, okay, they can do this and they can do that. What is interesting about this data is this. Number 2 and 1 and 2, the first two parts, numbers, giving students exercises or questions, and then assigning students to read textbooks are arguably the most common ways of teaching. So just stick to the textbooks and then give students questions and exercises. Number 3, 4, 5, and 6 are something that is maybe the pandemic made it even more common. What is interesting for me is especially number 3 and number 6, because number 4 about assigning students to use electronic resources and interactive teaching for interactive online teaching for number 5 are pretty much, yeah, because of people started to use technology. But the number 3 about assigning students to read supplementary materials and number 6 assigning students to do projects or creative assignments are not just because you just use the technology. This is something else. This is more about how to enrich learning, how to make it more personalized and interesting. And these two things, assigning students to read supplementary materials, so aside from the textbook, and assigning students to do projects or creative assignments, are the ones that increase the most. So this shows that there is something moving within how the Indonesian teachers started to teach. This is still at the beginning of the data. A lot of work needs to be done. But again, there is something going on. There is a promising progress that happens because of the disruption of COVID pandemic. So we'll see. Hopefully, we can carry the momentum this year and years ahead. Next, please. Some of the insights, and this is from the data from our flagship program from the teacher leadership, Guru Penggerak. So for instance, like the teachers started to develop, they learn the technology, and then they use that to develop interesting models. And this is interesting for two things. The first one, yes, they use the technology, but the second one is they are moving away from the textbook. So they develop models for the students, and not just develop models that are relevant to their students, but make it interesting. So usually maybe the teachers use textbooks most of the time, and this is like something promising once again. And then the second one, the quote about the use of online group, and the teachers thought that it would be difficult because in her mind, how would you do on group work online? And then she found out that actually students were more active than what she had thought before and generated new ideas, more engagement. So it gave the teachers belief that, oh, okay, this could work. And then not only that, but also it's not about the technology by itself, but how to make it enhance the learning. For instance, this teacher learned about differentiated instruction, and then using that to think about how she can differentiate the assessment of the students. So for instance, videos, sounds, and visuals, and increase the submission of the assignment during the pandemic. So this is again like not just about, hey, I use the technology, but it's more about, hey, I use the technology then to improve the quality of student engagement and the quality of the learning, which is actually the essence of good teaching and learning. Next. We also have like the online teacher learning series since October. This is actually still the data from last month. I believe the number has increased from this. But we also see how the Indonesian teachers started to be more comfortable with the kind of like training that is given in the online platform. And they do this voluntarily. I think that is actually one of the key aspects of many. Because before, teacher learning is more about because they are given like the letter from the principal or from the local education office to attend certain workshop in the specific place for a given time. This is basically, we just like, okay, these are like, you can join this, and there is no force mechanism, right? Mandatory mechanism, but it's more about, if you want, go ahead, sign up, and then you participate. And we have like 73% completion rate, which is good for an online learning ecosystem. Next slide. What also surprising is that when the minister and I, for instance, visited like remote places like the small islands in West Papua some time ago, we found like in one of the Desa Idete, so this is like one of the most challenging region in Indonesia, very limited resources, but we found like some teachers who have already been engaged in this training platform, and they completed some modules as well. So it was very encouraging to see that. And their internet connection was not really good, but they still want, because they wanted to learn, they completed those modules well. So then this is something that, again, like we did not expect this, but apparently for the remote and underdeveloped regions, suddenly opening access to how they can increase their capacity, especially also choosing what is relevant for their training. Next. We also developed like the crowdsourcing model. So this is a different way of learning for teachers. Instead of like the government giving like okay, these are like the guidance that you need to follow during the pandemic, we thought that the situations are so complex and so diverse, and it's impossible for the ministry just like to give like, okay, follow these guidelines and you'll be fine, because situations are different and situations keep changing. So we decided to, hey, why don't we use like a platform for crowdsourcing so teachers can learn and share ideas from each other in this platform. And since this is already a year, the platform has been accessed almost 80 million times, and many 229,000 active users and tens of thousands of lesson plans and articles, 21 million downloads and collaborative actions. these are like we believe that how the teachers start to feel that they can access the best expertise from teachers from all over Indonesia. So they can go directly to their subject or to the grade that they're teaching. And then they look at like the ideas and customize to their context. So before, like this expertise are maybe like so isolated, they maybe meet in like workshops, face-to-face workshops, and suddenly now they can access all these different ideas, lesson plans from all over, especially the ones that are the same subject or the same grade as they are. So it increases the access to expertise around teachers in Indonesia. Next. This is what the minister also mentioned earlier about the technology platform. I just wanted this slide about the teaching. So we also building like this platform at the moment. Hopefully we will start like this pilot for using it in our Sekolah Penggerak this year. How teachers are given like the support to teach better. So technology can help them to differentiate learning, project-based learning, and also how they can also continue to learn. So using the micro-learning modules, also giving feedback from each other, and then menu for training so they can select what is relevant for them. Next, please. Yeah, this is Sekolah Penggerak that I mentioned earlier. What I want, can we go to the next slide? I think the next slide has the pillars. Yes, okay. So Sekolah Penggerak is our main strategy. Of course, it's about how to strengthen the human resources in the school, especially the leadership. So we want to test our theory of change. If we invest in the human resources much more than the infrastructure, because will it make a difference, right? So we believe it does, and we're going to test it to the Sekolah Penggerak, because the approach is not like the Sekolah Penggerak is not like the schools that have already like the best programs or the best infrastructure. These are like the schools that can be like just like so-so schools, but they have like the quality leaders, the human resources that are willing to learn, having growth mindset, and believe in like all students, regardless where they're coming from or their background, can reach like their highest potentials. So and then the teachers are the same too. All teachers can do like complex things, can reach their highest potentials as teachers too, if they're given like this opportunity to learn and also believe in this like growth mindset, that they can be better every single time if they continue to learn. So we want to test this theory, that theory of change that we believe investing in the human resources, especially the leadership, and then with the paradigm about teaching and learning, about the foundational competencies that Minister mentioned earlier, the literacy and numeracy and all like this important like 21st century skills, part of the character. We want to invest like 25% of the program will be about the project-based learning. So we actually started from the K-12 to try to introduce the project-based learning where teachers from across subjects can collaborate. Since this is going to be like something new, and then we believe that it will actually improve student engagement and student learning. And the school will use the technology to use database planning, and then for teaching and learning, the digitalization will help about the teaching and learning, like the platform that I showed earlier, and also help like the principles about how to allocate resources, organize resources using the technology, making it more efficient, so that the adults in the school can focus on what matters most, which is about how to help the students learn better. And then how we accompany every single school, we will do like consultative and asymmetrical training or coaching with the school, because each school will have like different context, different challenges, so they will be also coached accordingly. Next. So this is the plan. So it will grow from time to time, and we will start with 2,500 Sekolah Penggerak this year, and it will grow to 10,000 and 20,000 the next 2 years, hopefully. and it will reach more areas in Indonesia. So now we started with 111 actually, and then it will go to the full capacity, all regions in about 2 years. Next. And the last is about, can education technology realize its promise? This is the question, and we are so like have the euphoria about technology, and it made us have to pause and reflect. And next, please, next slide. I came across this report by the Brookings Institute. They did like this study at the end of last year. They reviewed experimental and quasi-experimental evaluations of education technology interventions, especially from pre and secondary school in low and middle income countries. This is very important. So it's not like the modern countries, but it's more like the low middle income that released in the past 20 years, so 2000 to 2020, that looking specifically the studies or interventions that tried to improve student learning. And one of like their findings is that a key finding is that we should actually think carefully. We should actually not suddenly, okay, let's go all digital, right? They will argue about differentiation. So this study concluded that we have to actually look at what problems and context that we are having in a given ecosystem or a given community. So we have to understand about what the needs are with the system and the existing infrastructure and the capacity, and then look at, given that context, so what is like the best available evidence on intervention in that kind of condition. Then after that, we have to assess also continuously when we do the implementation. So basically, it's about a careful and more thoughtful approach about how to use the education technology that can actually improve student learning. So it's not just technology for the sake of using technology, but technology should be a tool, placed as a tool to enhance the quality of the human process human quality in the process, which is most important of all is the students. Next. Because they also came back to this instructional core. Technology is not about just like replacing the adults or the humans there, but it should actually enhance the quality of the human interaction. So between educators and learners with the education materials, the text, and are also arguably the parents in the same part here. So maybe it should be like a square or a rectangle, but they're saying that what matters most to learning is the interactions about educators, learners around education materials. So it's about the human interaction. And that's what we should focus on our intervention in technology. Next. So as we come down to like how to reimagine teaching and learning and the role of technology here, this study argues that like the 4 EdTech intervention models that can potentially improve student learning. The first one is what the minister mentioned earlier, right? So the lecturing, yeah, that can be or standardized instruction. Yeah, it can be given pre-recorded videos or live lessons. That can be done, and I think the research also shows that this is one of the good interventions, possible interventions that we can do. So, for instance, in areas where it's hard to find teachers, or the high teacher absenteeism, right? Or schools or regions where that have very low expertise, especially in the mastery of the subject area, subject matter, and the pedagogy. This can be replaced by a scale-up version of standardized quality instruction. And the second one that is possible, by the way, these are not an education system should do all of these 4, but they can choose which one that are relevant to their context. So it's not like for everyone, but this is an option. So the second option is facilitating differentiated instruction. So there's the technology about the computer adaptive learning where they can detect and then adjust how each students can be given the instruction accordingly, or we can do like live one-on-one tutoring using the technology. And the third option that is possible is expanding opportunities for practice. So for instance, in situation where teachers maybe don't interact with the students much and cannot check the understanding. Technology can help expand that opportunities for practice, for reviewing the topics for the students after they finish their lessons in the classroom. And the fourth option is about increasing learners' engagement, like the gamification, making more interesting and relevant for the students in their learning. So these are like the four options that can actually improve student learning based on the review of research done by the researchers in the Brookings Institute. And we think about, as we think about reimagining learning, we should also be mindful about the system, the context of the systems, but either the local system or the national system as a whole, and choose what is differentiate what is most relevant to each given situation. I think that will be all for my presentation for today. I'm looking forward for the discussion of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Iwan, for a very insightful presentation. I think lots to talk about from the presentation. I would now like to invite our co-panelist, Mr. JASPAL SIDHU. He's the founder and chairman of the SIS and Inspirasi group of schools in Indonesia. Pak JASPAL, thank you for joining us.
Oh, most welcome. Most welcome. Sure, thank you.
Thank you. And we also have Mr. Noah YARROW. He's a senior education specialist from the World Bank. Noah, thank you for joining us. He's joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. It's a great honor to have you with us, Noah.
Thank you so much. Nice to see everyone. Okay,
great. I think we've had a really powerful morning sessions with Pak Nadim earlier, and of course, Pak Iwan's presentation, lots to talk about. And I think real insights into how Indonesia's education system is innovating and really reforming. JASPAL, if I can start off the panel discussion with you. You have been in Indonesia's education system for more than 25 years. You have set up schools across the country. I think one of the key innovations that you have brought to Indonesia's education system really is schools with different price points. I know you run SIS and Inspirasi Group, and you are meeting the needs of not just the upper middle income, but I think the middle income, as we would say, and I think also going towards the lower middle income. Can you share with us your observations and your learnings from your 25 years operating in Indonesia's education sector?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. First, to my Indonesian friends, I extend my deepest condolences on this tragic demise of these very brave sailors. To my panelists, it is really a privilege for me as an operator to be talking with you and next to you. I worked in Indonesia for more than 25 years, and I've seen the country from within, and I've a really love for the people. Bahasa Indonesia saya dan lagu-lagu dangdut lumayan lah. I'm a private sector operator, and I chair the SIS Inspirasi group of schools, and it is my mission to make quality education affordable and sustainable in this country, because my father was a satpam, came from a poor family, especially in Indonesia, where the K-12 rankings are not impressive. And I'll share with you my observations through my work. Our model works differently. I don't start schools at the bottom end and struggle with cash flows and quality. I turn the pyramid upside down. The first SIS school we set up was at $14,000 a year. Now, hang on. That is very expensive. So I halved that to 7, and I established 3 more schools in Jakarta. And I also know $7,000 a year expensive. So I halved that to $4,000 a year. And I established schools in Medan and Semarang. And I know even that's expensive. So we halved that to $2,000 a year. And we put a school in Palembang. I also know $2,000 a year is still expensive for the general population, and we are halving that again. We have expanded in other Southeast Asian countries and India, and I'm continuing to find ways to bring prices down. At these kind of prices, we have students performing above world averages and going to top universities. We are a strategic partner with the IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group. Now, people ask me, how do you lower tuition fees and maintain quality? See, when you start lowering fees to establish schools, 2 things need to happen. 1, infrastructure design needs to change. And 2, you need to hire from local communities. But, but the problem is many of the teachers in some of the smaller cities have passion, but they lack best practices and they're stuck in traditional teaching methods. So what we did was we created an ecosystem that I call vertical collaboration, where every teacher in our school group, up and down the tuition fee pyramid, collaborates freely all year around with technology. So no one is operating in isolation, and that's the failure of many schools, operating in isolation. So our student outcomes improved. In 2019, we were internationally recognized for this vertical collaboration idea that brought fees down, and we were accorded with UK's Financial Times and the IFC World Bank with a global award for the transformational work we do in education. That was in London. Last month, we were named by Capital Finance out of London as the best international education institution in Southeast Asia for the impact that we bring. Now, as a practitioner, and I tell a lot of people, investors, the way to look at education very simply is through the 3 Ps of education: people, program, and place. I try to simplify this for people to understand. People. I'm looking at new and innovative ways to hire and train community teachers and fresh graduates. My view, and I'm very, very sorry, and I say the education system is broken and we really need new ideas. So I hired Deloitte to help me understand what is happening outside the education industry. How are top companies like Facebook, Google, and Starbucks hiring creative and innovative staff? What is the human capital development out there that I can bring in the education industry? I'm very happy to say that we have, over the last 18 months, come up with a very novel playbook to hire and train community teachers. I'm now working with Oxford University to scale this up with an open smart register platform underwritten by WHO. We are looking at international grants to catalyze pro-learning and pro-resilience interactions between teachers, parents, and students in Indonesia, India, and Africa. And sometime in due course, I hope to share this with the World Bank and, of course, the ministry. On program, I want to quickly state 3 things. One, I'm seeing a focus on content delivery, but not on the process of learning, as Pak Nadim is saying. Now, these are skills needed for employment one day. So in our group, we are always looking to add to our curriculum new ideas, 21st century skills, what I call the PACE initiative. PACE, P-A-C-E, perseverance, analytical skills, collaboration and communication, and entrepreneurism. Pak Nadim hit it on the head. Education cannot give us all jobs. We need those micro entrepreneurs. Number 2, technology. With the price of computers and handheld devices coming down, I'm very excited by the power this can do. We are data driven. I'm so happy to hear from Pak Iwan, Pak Nadim. We are looking at big data. We need to free teachers from their mundane tasks and making learning fun and for them to experiment. We are also experimenting things like virtual and augmented reality and advocating a hybrid approach, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. 3, the program needs to focus on our environment, more so because of this pandemic. So in our group, we are pivoting to a focus on the UN SDGs with more and more of a school-based projects. I'm looking to train our teachers to be what I call novice environmentalists. Imagine the power of a teacher in front of 30, 40 students to create a movement to save our earth. And I think teachers have a big role in the UN SDGs. Finally, P for place, which many people take for granted. School design will change and must change if teaching and learning is to change. Group settings, open spaces for collaboration, the ease of movement of learners from inside to outside. The pandemic is also making us health conscious, and I ask my team and I ask many schools to start thinking, what is a post-pandemic school? What will it look like? And I can tell you the architects of the world are split. No one have real ideas. I'm just curious and I keep pushing. We all are moving to the IFC World Bank Green Edge Certificate. So that's my input. And thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to share.
JASPAL, I think the innovations that you have brought to your schools really are quite amazing. if I may now invite Noah from the World Bank. Noah, you've just authored a very, I think, groundbreaking report on the promise of education in Indonesia. And I think you have a number of insights from that report you'd like to share with us.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. We at the World Bank have done a number of projections on the impacts of COVID in Indonesia and globally. And what we see is that the learning loss is going to be very significant, particularly for middle-income countries like Indonesia. Some of the upper income countries have been able to maintain learning, not quite as much as during non-COVID times, but have done a fairly good job of maintaining learning. While in some of the lowest income countries, unfortunately, very little is learned by students in a given year. And so the fact that schools are closed hasn't had a major impact on student learning profiles. While in a country like Indonesia, the impact is fairly significant, despite many efforts of the government to maintain and support learning during the school closure period. So what we're looking at today is very much unequal impacts. For example, students who did distance learning during the pandemic, according to a nationally representative the survey that the World Bank conducted of 4,000 households this past November 2020, we found that the average amount of time students who were doing distance learning engaged in learning was 2.3 hours per day. But that those from wealthier families, those living in Jakarta, did significantly more hours than those in rural areas and from lower income families. And so what we really see is this unequal impact of the pandemic and of school closures on student learning. And those that are better off are able to better cope with the challenge of COVID. And it's this inequality that really concerns us. And when we look at some of the hybrid approaches, we see that there were changes over time, right? The Ministry of Education launched online learning TV learning. And according to our survey in August, a little bit over half of the surveyed students were participating or viewing some amount of TV, educational TV each week. But that number dropped to only 10% in November 2020. And so we really saw this shift toward other mobile platforms. WhatsApp was a favorite way for students to connect with teachers. And that's very positive. But these types of platforms often lack structured mechanisms for feedback. So one of the complaints that we heard from students was that they would complete assignment, but didn't necessarily get detailed feedback from the teacher on what they did well or what they could improve upon. And teachers themselves often were not able to systematically track student learning. And so this is something that the ministry and teachers and parents and students and all of us invested in education are really going to need to work on. And we applaud the minister's efforts to change mindsets. And he talked about developing teachers, and Pak.Iwan mentioned school leaders. We think this is a very promising approach, really about building resilience, because unfortunately, COVID is not the last challenge that Indonesia will face. Right? So there's a need to expand access to the internet, expand the capacity of teachers to use technology, and work to make sure that hybrid and online learning can be accessed by everyone. And this is something we really appreciate about the ministry's approach, this kind of inclusive partnership approach. We see the ministry working closely together with the private sector, the NGOs, with international partners, such as the World Bank. We're very privileged to be starting an impact evaluation of online teacher training. And we really feel like this is an excellent model, right? Nobody has all of the answers. The minister has established a very clear plan, very clear objectives. And what we're very eager to do is to try and help the ministry identify those elements that are working very well, and then those elements that could benefit from additional support, and do this in a rigorous and transparent way for us in the domain of online teacher training. So we think this is an exciting development with lots of opportunity. We're also concerned that at the end, the ministry really focus on building back better, right? Working with districts and provinces to improve the overall system, because to go back to where things were is not going to be helpful. But given the time constraint, I've elected not to use the slides. That is the sum total of my remarks. I'm happy to go into the PowerPoint if that's helpful. But looking at the time, I thought it would be better to just summarize my remarks. Thank you so much.
You know, it kind of gels well with morning sessions. If I may now kind of go into a Q&A with our panelists. There's a, you know, thinking, and Nadim mentioned this, that, you know, like you said, no, we cannot go back. COVID-19 has kind of really pushed the education sector forward. I think Iwan's presentation really illustrated the amount of work the Ministry of Education has done. It is quite amazing and admirable that, you know, the ministry has put in so much effort in terms of taking things forward. The theme for this session, of course, was from classroom to hybrid. You know, so there is this question about, of course, online learning is here to stay. It's a matter of how you use it, how do you combine it with classroom instructions. Nadim mentioned that teachers, you know, giving lectures is a no-go for you know, moving forward for universities, and rather to have a more interactive session. One of the things he mentioned which really caught my attention was classrooms need to be noisy rather than silent. So that whole format of, you know, a teacher delivering a lesson, everybody listens, and then they go home. So Pak Iwan, maybe I'll start with you in terms of, you know, the government and the ministry, and you've been instrumental in terms of really leading the charge, yeah, in change within the ministry. In terms of hybrid, what is your thinking or imagination of what a hybrid classroom would be going forward?
Yeah, thank you, Pak Shoaib. I think one of like the strategies that I think we have been talking about even before the pandemic is like the flipped classroom. So rather than spending the time of the two students and teachers interaction when they meet face to face on just like pouring like the content, right? And that can be done as like an independent study on its own by each students at their own when, you know, their own time. So when they meet, the students and the teachers meet. So what is happening is like all of these, like the assignments or projects or whatnot, giving feedback. So therefore, the quality of the interaction increases, and then the quality of learning also increases, because that is like actually the most the messier part, where teachers need to provide feedback and coaching the students and etc. and to do the collaboration. So I think that is like one model that I think we should push more. At the moment, because of the pandemic, it's still like a major health concern. So the face-to-face meetings are still limited. So like 50% of the student population, and then there is a shift, right? So then this still involves some kind of how to provide this kind of intervention or mode of learning. So I think that is one of the capacity for teachers to then create this kind of content, to be a more comfortable with producing interesting. So not only like the modules, so then they can learn online, but also like this quality standardized instruction delivery. So then they can provide this for their whatever subjects that they're teaching. I think that's one of the strategies that we've been talking for a long time, flipped classroom.
Okay, just if I may come to you, I mean, you run numerous schools across the country. In the past 1 year, a lot of, I'm sure at SIS, a lot of students have been learning from home. But as schools reopen, how are you handling this situation? And how do you see the evolving nature of hybrid learning and hybrid classrooms?
Sure. Let me tell you where my worry is. I mean, first of all, we are online. We have been online, and we are dying to get our kids back at schools. As Pak Nadim said, social interaction is a big thing, and that's so important. That's the well-being of the children are my biggest worry currently. Now, one of the biggest worries of hybrid for me is the home situation. Now, hybrid would mean the children will have to do things on their own, but the homes need to be conducive. Parents need to be involved. Technology needs to exist in the home. So I always tell people, let's not get very excited about giving children something that they can do. I would love to give them a lesson for them to sort of, go through at home and come back and teach act as facilitators. That's where we all should get to. But the issue is when a lot of them go home, parents haven't bought into this. They have chores at home. Some of them are working. Environment is not conducive. So I would urge that as we look at this hybrid situation, and that's what we are doing, Shoaib, looking at the home, because school, we can control. The homes, we cannot. And that's something that it's very important. And we do this through surveys to see what the home condition is, and then we adjust accordingly.
Right, I think very good point. The home is somewhere, if it's going to be hybrid, the home plays a very important role. Noah, from your observations and from your research, how is this going to work? What would you say for a country like Indonesia or many developing countries where the home does not maybe have, like JASPAL says, a conducive environment? It's not just about technology. It's also about the participation of parents and having a proper desk, for example, just to study at, right? How do you see this evolving?
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. I think the minister and Dr.Iwan both mentioned the opportunities inherent in technology around differentiation. And something that Indonesia and many other middle-income countries still have a lot of room for improvement on is, for example, inclusion of students with physical disabilities or hearing impairment or sight impairment. And there's some really nice digital applications that can work with these challenges for students and help them access schooling, particularly beyond the primary level, where we often see a very high rate of dropout. And so I think using technology in differentiated ways can provide gains in these areas, right? So some students who have other challenges may elect to mostly learn from home with the use of technology, while many students are probably best served in the classroom, in the school, with the teacher integrating technology into their instruction for some of the things Mas Menteri was talking about in terms of teaching at the right level, project-based learning, and other objectives. And so really by working with teachers and students and understanding their needs and capacities, you'd hope to see not one model for hybrid learning, but many, where for some students, hybrid learning takes place basically exclusively in the classroom and is about integrating technology into the teaching and learning process. And then for other students at the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe mostly from home, with occasional visits to school for peer interactions and interactions with the teacher, and then other students somewhere in between. And this will take time to develop, and I don't think any of us kind of has all of this figured out yet, but this is the direction we see things going. Thank you.
I think we have a couple more minutes to kind of wrap up. Maybe I'll just ask for your observations, starting with Pak Iwan. I think one of the key, what you call it, post-COVID phenomenons that have arisen is really the need for the education sector to engage with the private sector, and not the private sector in education, but the private sector in technology, the private sector in other fields, and bring those learnings into the sector. I think the ministry is already engaging with a number of these so-called private sector players, especially the ed-tech players. Yeah, and I think that synergy is becoming very critical, I think, to as education goes forward. So the question for all three of you really is, what, for example, could the gaming industry teach the education industry? Right, gaming is a huge industry. There are a lot of learnings in how people play games and how they learn from gaming, right? Would that be something that, as education experts and practitioners, would that be something that, going forward, there could be more synergy or more learnings from those kind of sectors? Pak Iwan.
Thank you, Pak Shoaib. That is a very interesting question. I would say, and again, I would refer to the study that I shared earlier from the Brookings Institute, right? So it's about differentiating the intervention in how technology would enhance the quality of teaching and learning processes. So it's not, again, so the one size fits all also applies to the how technology or the intervention of technology. So we should first look at like what we need, like what kind of learning, teaching and learning, what kind of interaction that we want to see and happen, right? And then see how technology can help that, but also at the same time assessing the infrastructure. Like for instance, like Panwa mentioned earlier about, finally, like most teachers fall into or go to WhatsApp, for instance, right? Because of that is like the infrastructure constraint, and they cannot use the most sophisticated technology to do teaching and learning because of so many constraints. If not from the school, it's from the parents. Like was discussed earlier, JASPAL mentioned that, which is a very valid point. So it's about, for me, again, it comes back to the theme of this conference, about the creativity and critical thinking. Look at like the problem that we're facing and see how technology and other components can solve the problem and towards the outcome that we want. So we need to define the outcome first as well. And for us at the moment, with the first Merdeka Belajar, like the first big bang that the minister did was to change the national education system, because we are measuring the wrong thing, right? So we need to measure what matters. So then once we're clear on that, and then see then how we can improve the quality of technology engagement in this, then we can do like the solution. So I think in terms of the gaming industry, so a lot of this like intrinsic motivation, and there is this kind of what we call the zone proximal development. This is one of the learning theory, right? So it's kind of I+1. So in another theory, so meaning that you are given like the not just where you are, but a little bit over, like beyond stretching a little bit, but not too much, right? So then you continue to learn more, and that gives like the confidence for you to go forward and forward. So in that sense, yes, I think that is actually part of the learning philosophy or learning theory part. So what is applied in it's maybe a bit funny, maybe the gaming industry is applying that, and the education sector is not so much, right? So this a lot of like the minister mentioned about we have to emancipate the mindset. It's kind of like it's a moot point. We have like all this competency, yeah, you can do all these strategies, but it's like you have like the most sophisticated tools, but you don't know how to use them. right? So even like actually the simple tool can actually solve your problem. So I think with that in mind, or that analogy, I believe the same with how we should approach education going forward. The hybrid model, because how do you define hybrid anyway? What is the, what do you mean by hybrid, right? What component, the portion, when to use what and how much, and so on. So a lot of like, it's still like a loaded concept, and we need to unpack that to make it more relevant to each context.
Iwan, Noah, and then I'll go to JASPAL to give the final word.
Sure, thanks. So I agree with pretty much everything Iwan has said. I think he and I are reading many of the same reports. I did want to note, not all games are created equal, right? Some gamification strategies allow students to engage deeply, meaningfully with the material. They use AI to make it challenging. Others, some that my son plays, frankly, he gets very obsessed with just getting to the next level. And I say, well, what did you learn? Like, what are you actually doing? He's like, Dad, I don't care. I just want to get to the next level. So you have to be careful. Some of these approaches work really well and deliver, I think, high quality engagement and learning opportunities. Others not so much. So part of our job is to support governments to choose and work with those higher quality options, and then hopefully empower teachers and families and students themselves to make choices that are going to support them to go in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. JASPAL.
Sure, thanks. When I listen to Iwan and Nadim, I get excited because Indonesia, when I see this sort of leadership, Indonesia is the cusp of a very big change. So thank you. On gamification, I'm a big fan. I think children learn best when they have fun. But as Noah says, we got to be very careful between addiction, learning, and engagement. So once they are engaged and they learn versus addiction. In terms of the type of games, we are also very careful. We look at making sure that these games and the school-based subjects have a interesting mesh. But when I look at these games, there's a lot of real-world applications in these games. So they're very, very interesting. And it also gives you feedback as you go along. And the way they challenge each other, peers, groups, collaboration, they talk. So that's a lot of interesting things that come out of this. But there are games and there are games. But I think we cannot move away from this. Thank you, Shuaib.
Thank you very much. I think it's been an illuminating discussion with our esteemed panelists, Iwan, Noah. Thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C. And JASPAL, thank you so much also for sharing your insights from Singapore. And as I say, I know the online platform really is allowing us to engage with our expert speakers from all over the world. And of course, Iwan, thank you so much again. Our deep appreciation to you and to the Ministry for helping us with this morning sessions and partnership with the Ministry of Education. Thank you so much. God bless.